You're listening to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, the go-to podcast for high performers. I'm Andrew Moses. Each week, you'll hear my thought-provoking conversations with Olympians, pro athletes, CEOs, elite coaches, best-selling authors, and other high performers to uncover their secrets to success. Get ready to be inspired each week when we talk about leadership, teamwork, work ethic, and more. Are you ready? Let's go. Hi, everyone. This week, my guest is Olympic gold medalist Tara Lipinski. In 1998, at the age of 15 years old, Tara became the youngest individual gold medalist in Winter Games history, breaking a record that had been held since 1928. Since retiring from competitive skating, Tara has continued taking on bold new challenges that push her outside of her comfort zone. She's an author, actress, broadcaster, and recently produced a TV docuseries. Tara and I caught up a few weeks ago, and she gave me a candid, behind-the-scenes look at her career. We explored the success secrets that propelled her to record-setting success as a 15-year-old figure skater, and we talked about how she draws upon the same mindset, skills, and habits today in new ventures. Our conversation is jam-packed with practical lessons to help you overcome doubt, better manage your adrenaline, and rise to the occasion when the spotlight is on. If you are ready to take your performance to a championship level in anything, then this conversation is for you. So let's pull the tarp and get straight to Tara Lipinski. As I understand it, your first time on skates was roller skates. It wasn't even ice skates. How did we go from roller skates to the ice rink?
So we went from roller skating to ice skating because, living in Jersey at the time in the 80s, my mom and her best friend who had a daughter my age, it was a rainy day and in the newspaper it said, come to the local roller rink and take a class and you get a free Care Bear. So clearly it was Care Bear driven. We went and in fine print, it said after 10, 15 lessons, could you actually receive that said Care Bear? So I was not leaving without my Care Bear. And then after 10 to 15 lessons, I kind of was hooked. And it was a very different sport than ice skating, I would come to realize. It was much more social. The community there was incredible. And as a little kid, going to a roller rink every day to practice, there was also, so much balance where we did all these shows and we dressed up and it was so much fun. So for me, it was very, very social to roller skate. And then when I turned over to ice skating, it became much more business, if you will.
So let's talk about that, Tara. So you get involved in ice skating and figure skating in particular. Was there a moment where you realized that you might have the potential to be better at this than the average person around you?
I don't think I ever realized that when I was that young or as a kid, but I do think that I was able to recognize that I was succeeding in the sport and that I was winning competitions and I was getting gold medals and I was moving up levels really quickly. All of that registered, but I don't think I ever realized, oh, wow, I am any different than anyone else till a little bit later on where it started to, you start to hear the buzz a little bit. And then I would start to think, oh goodness, like now I've really got to deliver.
When things started to get a little more serious for you in terms of developing that craft as a figure skater, what did the typical day look like? I would imagine you were up pretty early in the morning and you had a lot of work to do. You were probably balancing school at some point. What did the typical day look like as things were getting more serious?
Yeah, I mean, by the time I switched to ice skating, and when I did switch to ice skating, I loved roller skating so much I couldn't give it up. So I still was doing both. So I was splitting my days training at the roller rink and then the ice rink and going to full-time school, which was the reason we just solely stuck to ice skating and figure skating at a certain point, just because we realized that was not sustainable. But then, obviously moving away from home and eventually having to be homeschooled because of the training schedule, probably at my toughest training out. Well, actually, when I was 9 living in Texas at the time where my parents moved for work, which isn't a big training hub for figure skating. I was skating in a mall at the Galleria, and the only time they had was 3:30 a.m. every day. So that was probably the worst. It wasn't the longest day for me, but it was probably the worst, just getting up at 3 a.m, skating from 3:30 to 9, and then going to school and then practicing in the evening. But as I, moved to a training center later on and was training for the Olympics, I was waking up every morning, 7 o'clock, skating all day, doing school. In the afternoon, I had tutors that would come to the house from 3 to 7, but I would essentially skate from 7 to 3 and then come home and do school and go to bed.
I'm tired just thinking about it, Tara. Talk about the discipline and the ambition. So, where do you think that came from? Was that something that you were born with? Was that something that you developed? Talk about that, the ambition and obviously the discipline to stick to such a rigorous training regimen and an exhausting lifestyle.
Yeah, it just sort of happens. I don't think you recognize that it's happening, but, I loved skating so much. And I was always sort of given the opportunity by my parents to, if you want to go home, if you want to go to school and have a normal, social life and not live this skating life, you can. So I always had that option. I always felt comfortable making that choice. But what's crazy is I loved it so much, even my mom saying that to me would give me such anxiety because, yes, there's tough days. Yes, there's tears. Yes, the cold, long training hours are hard. But at the end of the day, I really, really did love it. It's sort of, I always say it's like a relationship, it's a little bit of a love hate. There's good days, there's bad days. There's a lot of work to make it work, but you can't imagine your life without it.
So I'm curious. I've heard you describe yourself as a perfectionist, but also somebody who kind of mastered the art of winging it from time to time, right? I mean, whether it was in the figure skating, whether it's what you're doing, post skating, in the broadcast world, hosting the Kentucky Derby, National Dog Show, producing docuseries, it seems like you're always putting yourself into unfamiliar, uncharted territory for you, winging it as you've described a little bit. But there's also this element of perfectionism, and in a sport where it almost seems like perfectionism is always expected. How did you balance that? How did you balance kind of striving for perfection while also recognizing that you needed to approach some scenarios and a lot of situations where you're never going to be fully prepared?
Yeah, I think it's always figuring out that balance, and I still do it till this day when I'm approached with a new opportunity where it's like, you got to wing it a little bit, but being a perfectionist, you want to be prepared as much as you can. I think, I always say that sometimes I wing it, but at the end of the day, because probably I'm a little bit too much of a perfectionist, focused on doing a good job or excelling at whatever task I'm given, that I put a lot of thought behind it. But I think at a certain point, I've realized that, you can study, you can spend all these hours preparing for this moment. But at a certain point, you really do have to just let it happen and trust yourself and know that you've been in a situation like this before and that you usually figure it out.
How have you learned to navigate the moments when self-doubt creeps in? What are little things that you do maybe to try and redirect your mindset in those settings, whether it's in your skating life or today in challenging projects that you take on?
Yeah, I think that I realize, I've lived with that self-doubt for so long, being in a performance sport like I'm in, where you're under this incredible pressure in, a 4-minute program to nail every single jump. You get very accustomed, at least I do. I'd be very envious if there's others out there that don't have that self-doubt, but I've become very accustomed to just living with that. It's, like the good versus the evil. And now for me, I've learned that I just sort of recognize that it's there, but that's, just my mind sometimes playing tricks on me, and that I don't actually have to listen to that voice, and that I've had, a track record that I can fall back on and realize that, that self-doubt is just a little nerves, and sometimes nerves is a good thing. I also look at it that way, that gives you that extra boost of adrenaline, that extra bit of laser focus that you need. And I think it just shows that you care, but you just have to, I think for me, the hardest part, and it's been a long journey, is learning how to let that be there without listening to those words.
How do you balance that adrenaline, right? Like there's a right mix of adrenaline, like you described, where you're in the zone, you're focused, you're bringing your best. And then if it tips over too far, it can become anxiety provoking and stressful. And if you don't have that adrenaline going, maybe you can't muster up the energy for that performance or for that broadcast today. How do you regulate and monitor that?
I mean, it's really difficult. And sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't. And I think those are also lessons you have to learn where it's going to happen. One of those competitions, one of those times, whatever you're doing, it's just going to tip to the wrong end of the scale and it's not going to be a good go of it. And you're going to let the nerves sort of take over. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that the next time you go back out there that it's going to happen again, that it can be these isolated moment that happens that doesn't have to repeat itself. And I think that for me, I've tried so many different techniques of breathing, of really trying to relax into a better state of mind by positive thinking, or, even the night before, positive thought. And I think that sometimes can keep it at bay and make sure that you're in that perfect zone where you're letting the adrenaline, you're letting those butterflies work for you and not against you.
I recently talked with Olympic swimmer Reagan Smith, and she just finished her first Olympics. She won 3 medals, and she was telling me that she's really gone all in on the mental skills side of it, and in particular the positive self-talk. And she said something that I'm sure that's going to resonate with you, but it was kind of striking to me. She said, swimming's a sport where I'm out there all by myself. There is no way for anybody to get any message, positive or negative, to me when I'm under the water swimming in the pool. So if I'm hurting, if I'm not feeling confident, or I'm doing really well and I want to keep myself motivated, I've got to learn to be my own hype person. And that was something that she's really focused on, and she's really even doubling down on, and she's heading into Paris. Was that something that you thought about? When you're out there alone and you've got a team behind you, how are you getting yourself hyped up?
Yeah, it really all comes down to you, especially in individual sports like figure skating and swimming and gymnastics. And it's something that I think we are taught at a pretty young age, either working with sports psychologists or, just realizing that unfortunately you're sort of just pushed out to center ice to handle it on your own. And you have to figure it out. And it's, 4 minutes goes by quickly for us, but at the same time, it's the longest 4 minutes of your life. And there's all of these elements and all of these jumps that you have to hit. And it's really about pacing and learning who you are as a competitor and really honing in on the balance of all those components that I think sort of make magic sometimes happen in sports, when you realize, how did someone under all that pressure, execute so flawlessly? And it's years of practice, of mental practice, of physical practice, of being able to regulate your emotions in that moment and rely on your past success to give you that confidence. So I think for me, it was always looking back of, I've been here before. I trained this program 6 million times. And, again, repeating positive thoughts for me was huge. I would sort of talk to myself throughout the program, giving myself little pep talks, if you will, to get me through each element.
Are there things, Tara, when you think back now, on 12-year-old, 13-year-old, and then 15-year-old Tara, who's achieving all of this success, are there things that you think about now and you say, if I had the experience and the wisdom and the age I have today, are there things that you would have done differently or would have approached differently back then?
I do. I think that, looking back, I was a doubter. I was always sort of this nervous Nelly. And I think I'd tell my younger self that, Tara, you don't realize it, but you actually perform better under pressure. When the stakes are higher, you're going to skate better. And that's something that took a long time for me to learn. I would go to these competitions and I just felt too nervous. I let the nerves sort of overwhelm me and I didn't do my best. And I'd come home and think like, why do I do this to myself? Why, why can't I deliver under pressure in this moment when I've trained so hard for it? And then I'd realize later on in the season, I'd go to the world championships, the national championships, and obviously at one point the Olympics, and there couldn't have been any more pressure that was put on my shoulders than there was at that moment. And I would seamlessly do it. So there was something of a realization later on when I started to get into broadcast where, I put the headphones on for the first time and I thought, oh my goodness, like I picked another profession that is so filled with pressure and, live television and all these people in my ear and the pressure. Why did I do this? I should have, picked a job that was relaxing, for the second part of my career. And then I realized, wow, Tara, you actually thrive under that pressure. You seek it out. You want it. You hate it in the moment, but you love it and you can't live without it. And you actually maybe are made to perform under pressure. And that's given me a lot of confidence. And that's something I wish I could go back and tell my younger self that, oh goodness, like don't stress so much that, you have these doubts or that you don't feel the most confident athlete.
Do you think you enjoyed it in the moment or did you thrive in it or both?
I think both. I think that obviously when things are not going well, you're not enjoying it. But when things are happening, you're not only enjoying it, but you're thriving in that moment. And I think that's when you realize like, I'm kind of cut out for this. Like, this is my thing in life. This is where I really come alive. And I think when I competed, that the rush that I would get not only was so addictive, and it's why you just keep coming back for more, but it's a thrill and it's something that, even to this day, I love live television because it gives me a little bit of that essence of, oh, just throw me out into the deep end. Let's see what happens. But it's still not the same as throwing, myself center ice at an Olympic Games. And it's funny that I think I am always trying to seek those same feelings. It's just not the same. The rush that you get. And when things are going right, there's literally nothing, better in life for me than, hitting the ice, landing a perfect jump in the middle of a huge arena under, the highest stakes. It's kind of crazy.
I'm curious. I've interviewed Tessa Virtue a couple of times. She's an ice dancer from Canada and has had extraordinary success. And we talked most recently before the most recent Winter Olympics. And she said, Andrew, I would give anything to be center ice and feel that adrenaline, but I'm not ready to put in the work again. So I'm comfortable with my retirement and what I'm doing in life. And it sounds like maybe there's a little bit of that for you too, where you would give anything to be out there, but obviously you're at a different place in life in terms of the work it would take to get back out there.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, for me, I knew it early on after winning that Olympic gold medal that, as much as I crave that and love that, the amount of work that goes in to be able to get to that point is just, it takes over your entire life. So you have to be prepared to want to do that. And I think for me at that point, I had sort of reached all the goals that I wanted to, winning nationals, worlds, the Olympic gold medal, and then, having performances too that I was really couldn't have done better. So I felt like I was really leaving nothing on the ice and I was ready to move on and find that next challenge. And of course, there's, when I watch it and I see someone center ice having that moment, I think, oh my God, that's the best feeling. I wish I could have that. But I am very aware that I don't need to have that anymore just because of, all the pressure and all the time and energy that goes into making that moment.
So let's go back to that ultimate adrenaline rush. You're 15 years old. You win the gold medal, youngest individual gold medalist ever in Winter Games history. You broke a record that had been held since 1928. I mean, absolutely remarkable, Tara. How did you deal with the fame and the notoriety and celebrity that came, immediately thereafter as a result of that? I mean, you're 15 years old. I mean, it's almost impossible to comprehend.
Yeah, it was really, it was also a very unique time in skating. Skating was at the height of its popularity and there was just so much opportunity. And yeah, nothing can really prepare you for that. Although, I was in the sport and skating at an elite level for at least the last 5 years where, I was getting little tastes of what it was like. And so it wasn't a complete shock, but I just remember afterwards, obviously my training schedule was hard, but for years afterwards when I was touring and, had sponsors and endorsements and shows and I was hosting, I remember thinking I'm more tired than I was when I was training for the Olympics. It was just nonstop.
It's interesting, right? How you have to, like, when you have that singular focus and it shifts to not having a singular focus, and there are suddenly all kinds of other responsibilities associated with your performance and the sport, how it can get more complicated. You've got, like, obviously a portfolio of activities that you're involved in today, right? You're making documentaries, you're doing broadcast work. Do you think that time in your life where you had to juggle a lot kind of put you in a good position to juggle a lot of different things today? And
I think it really did. I think it trained me for it. And in a way, I think I seek it out. Again, I've been so used to doing, wearing so many different hats, doing so many different things that my life feels really strange and boring if I'm just working on one project that, sometimes my husband's like, it's okay. And I'm like, no, like, what else do I need to get into? So I think, that's probably just a bit of personality too. But I think skating definitely helped prepare me for that, to be able to sort of switch into different areas, to try different things, and to have a lot going on at once.
we can get along great, Tara, because I'm telling you, I just try and like fill my plate with as many things. I always say, like, if you want something done right, you find the busiest person that you can find and you ask them to take on one more thing. It's not always the answer, but it's how I think about things. I like to be busy. I like the adrenaline. I can relate to what you're sharing here. I'm curious, Tara, when you think about your career and all the things that you've done, one of the things that is almost so consistent, all the conversations I have with high performers, is that when people who've achieved extraordinary success like you have, they want people to realize that it's not easy, that it may look perfect to the eye on TV for 4 minutes, but there was so much failure, so many falls, so many challenges, so many times maybe when you didn't want to go to the rink or you didn't like how something was going. Talk about that for a moment. Talk about some of the unglamorous things kind of behind the scenes and why it wasn't easy.
Yeah, I mean, most of it is unglamorous. Most of it is more tears than smiles, at least for me. Like the smiles and the triumph was so great and so rewarding that it made it all worth it. But, those moments definitely are not happening every day. And training is the majority of your life. You go to, 15 events a year, but you're skating 365 days out of that year. And those days are hard and your body is not, primed and perfect at the beginning of a season. And it's not prepared to peak at the right moment like it does later on. And so you have to realize that for months and for many of the days of that year, you are putting in work that feels hard, feels impossible, feels like this will never happen. There's so many valleys and peaks and it's a roller coaster. But yeah, I think, you see these athletes, at the Olympics or, in games and you think, oh my goodness, they're just so programmed to be this amazing and this awesome all the time. And, I think people would be surprised to see that, when they're trading, when they're off and not on in the moment, that just like everyone else, it's really difficult and it's really hard.
Tara, I'm curious, when you think about all this, right? Has it sunk in for you yet? I mean, like how much you accomplished. It's hard to imagine, right, that, it happened in 1998 and I'm asking you if it's sunk in yet, but like, it's so extraordinary that I wonder if it ever fully sinks in. What are your thoughts on that?
It really doesn't. It's so strange you asked that. I remember talking to Scott Hamilton, an idol of mine. Obviously, I skated with him on tour for many years. And when I first won, he said, Tara, you will wake up 15 years from now and still have a pinch me moment and think, did I really do that? Did I really win an Olympic gold medal? How is that possible? And I remember thinking like, okay, and he is so right. I mean, there's just so many days that I sometimes will just sit and think like, wait, how did that actually that happened to me? Like, how did that happen? Is this really real? And I mean, not only at the moment, I remember when I won, it was such a surreal feeling. I didn't even feel like I won because I had spent, 15 years of my life thinking about winning or thinking about a moment like this, but it wasn't ever my moment. And then all of a sudden in a matter of, 11:01 to 11:02, your life changes and it's hard to accept it. You're so excited, but you still think like, how did this happen to me? Is it really happening?
It's amazing to think about. You're still having those pinch me moments, Tara. What a remarkable story. And you're still writing so many fantastic chapters. It's been so much fun sitting down and talking with you about your career and some of your success secrets and how you make it all happen, even today with so many different projects. Tara Lipinski, it's been so much fun sitting down with you. There's no question you are a tarp puller, and thank you for spending some time with me this week. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you can catch all of our upcoming episodes. And if you are like me and want a world full of tarp pullers, then leave a review to help others find us. You can also follow me on Twitter at Andrew H. Moses. That's Andrew H. Moses. And be sure to sign up for my email newsletter at everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter. I'll share tips and insights to help you achieve maximum success and happiness. Today is a great day to pull the tarp. I am rooting for you. See you next time.